Thank you, Whittaker. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Columbus, an inclusive spiritual community of people supporting each other in their personal search for truth and meaning. I'm Rick Spradlin. I'm your volunteer service leader this morning. To begin our service, let us light our chalice. The chalice speaks to us of reason, tolerance, and freedom, but also compassion, respect, and love. May its flame ever warm and illuminate our lives. And now let us affirm and promote the 7 principles which Unitarian Universalism is founded. Number 1, the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Number 2, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Number 3, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. Number 4, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Number 5, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. Number 6, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. And number 7, respect for the interdependent web of all existence, of which we are a part. And now this morning's offering will be given and received in the spirit of grateful fellowship. Thank you, Whittaker. Now, if you'll please turn in your gray hymnals to responsive reading 589. 589, Peace. My wife Karen is going to come up and help us with this. I will read the bold, and she will lead you in reading the italics. 589. Peace means the beginning of a new world.
It means that nations are friends. It means joy to the world.
Peace is quiet and calm. It is rest. It is silence after a storm.
It is love and friendship. It is the world's dream of dreams.
Peace brings comfort and happiness. It brings bread to the hungry. It brings prosperity to the nations.
It means the strong respect the weak, the great respect the small, the many respect the few.
It is like spring after winter.
It brings sunshine into the world. It is like sweet music after harsh sounds.
Thank you. Everyone wants peace. Well, be more accurately, everyone says that they want peace. But if everyone says they want peace, then why is it so hard for us to hold on to it when we have it? It seems that humanity's yearning for peace is matched only by our inability to hold on to it. Well, what exactly are we talking about here? What is peace? That seems like as good a place as any to start this conversation. So we look at the Oxford English Dictionary, and we'll look at the first three definitions it has for peace. Number one, peace is freedom from civil unrest or disorder, public order and security. Second definition, peace is the freedom from quarrels or dissension between individuals, a state of friendliness, amity, concord. Third definition, peace means freedom from anxiety, disturbances, be they mental, emotional, or spiritual. In other words, freedom from inner conflict, calm, tranquility. Okay, for me, that's actually rather helpful because peace, it would seem, runs counter to what we observe in nature. Because the natural world is filled with conflicts. Organisms compete for the resources they need to survive: air, water, food, space. In areas where these are sufficient, organisms live in comfortable coexistence. And in areas where resources are abundant, the ecosystem will contain a high level of diversity. The more capable an organism is in adapting to a change, the better chance it has of coexisting with other species. Animals and plants that have different requirements, like very specific requirements, like your cavity nesting birds, plants with a specific pH requirement, or animals like butterflies that can only eat one type of leaf and only lay their eggs on that one type, they have a more difficult time competing. Peace for an extended period of time, it would seem, is unnatural. Plants push on one another to gain sunlight. Their roots are also engaging in a constant underground chemical warfare. They secrete a wide variety of chemical compounds to inhibit the growth of their competitors. Then, of course, there's the competition that we usually think of. Carnivores eating herbivores, and herbivores ripping plants right from the root, just right out of the ground. As for human nature, archaeologists are divided into two camps, which they very aptly name themselves the doves and the hawks. The hawks believe that war is a natural part of human nature, while the doves, of course, disagree. The hawks point to archaeological evidence that they say suggests that war is a natural extension of our instinct for self-preservation, an innate part of human nature, even if you go back to hunter-gatherer societies. The Doves, though, argue that a broader view of human history clearly shows that the development of more complex societies has made it possible for humans to be manipulated beyond a simple sense of self-preservation into actual warfare. They argue that war is not innate part of human nature, even though minor conflicts are. They say it all began with agriculture. When human tribes no longer needed to live in a nomadic life following the herds that they hunted, they settled down and built permanent villages. They became more territorial. The land was less of a thing to be adapted to and more of a conquest to be possessed. The concept of land ownership was born. Whereas before, two different hunter-gatherer tribes could camp within a mile of each other and have very few conflicts, now, if two permanent farm-based cities were near one another, they would be in constant conflict over limited resources. Is war and conflict a natural part of human nature? Is the reason that humanity can't seem to hold on to peace because peace is just unnatural for us? A study released in 2020 by the Mathematics Department of the University of York shed light on the long-running debate about whether or not the number of worldwide battle deaths have been increasing or decreasing since the end of World War II. The team carried out a change point analysis on publicly available data, tracking the number of global deaths in battles since the Napoleonic Wars. The researchers fine-tuned an algorithm to accurately detect points in the data where there are changes in the sizes of wars. The results suggest that in addition to a distinct beginning and ending to the unprecedented bloodshed of 1910 to 1950, there was also an abrupt shift towards a greater level of peace in the early 1990s. Its data suggests that while the first half of the 20th century marked a period of extreme violence, the world has become more peaceful in the past 30 years. Co-author of the study, Niall McKay, said, "The question of whether or not today has become more or less dangerous is a hotly debated issue among historians. Our study attempts to address this question purely from the perspective of what the data tells us. The change for the better our analysis detected over the past 30 years may be due to peacekeeping work by global organizations like the United Nations and increased collaboration and cooperation between nations." So, we said earlier that peace was in conflict with nature, but it may be that it's really more in line with the complex nature of nature. The reality we perceive is filled with yins and yangs. Peace is the night to conflict's day. Peace is the cool breeze to conflict's hot rising air. And just as warm air and cold air cause our weather patterns, so does the cool air of peace and the warm air of conflict bring about our winds of change. It'll probably be a while before we really know whether or not war is just a part of our nature. I like to think that we can rise above it, but I feel strongly that while the majority of humanity earnestly desire peace, there will always be powerful individuals who gain more from us being at conflict. And there's another possibility, too. It's something I wondered about when I was a Christian. The Gospel of Luke, chapter 17, verses 20 and 21, says, and this is Jesus speaking, "The coming of the kingdom of God is not something that can be observed, nor will people say, 'Here it is,' or 'There it is,' because the kingdom of God is in your midst." And that's the New International Version. Other versions interpret that last line, "The kingdom of God is within you." I wondered back then if Jesus was saying that peace in a peaceful world isn't something that can be found or built or painstakingly achieved. Maybe he was saying that peace we seek is already inside us, waiting for us to accept it on its terms instead of trying to create it on our own terms. It's not a mainstream interpretation. The rest of that chapter actually is where the notion of the rapture comes from, where it says two people will be in one bed and one will be taken, the other left. Two women will be grinding grain together, one will be taken and the other left. Now, to my Christian friends, don't get excited. This doesn't mean that I'm going back to being a believer. It's just a thought that had stayed with me over the years. Maybe conflict and peace are just opposite sides of the same coin. Maybe you need one in order to recognize and appreciate the other. But I don't think war and conflict have to remain as violent as they have been throughout our history. I remember back in the 1980s, a friend of mine was really fond of quoting Einstein when he said, "You cannot simultaneously prepare for and prevent war." He had a poster of it. And every time we would get into hot political discussions, he was always bringing it up. He was very opposed to Reagan's military buildup of the 80s. He believed that this was pushing us closer to the brink of nuclear war. Now today, we are witnessing a brutal invasion of a peaceful, democratic nation, Ukraine, by an autocratic dictator in Russia. Putin must have calculated that NATO wouldn't risk involvement out of fear of sparking a nuclear conflict. But what he didn't calculate on, in addition to the Ukrainians' willpower, he didn't count on the world community organizing a nuclear level of sanctions. Sanctions have seemed like a joke to people who didn't understand the devastation that they can have on an enemy's economy and their ability to wage war. But it's the fear of nuclear annihilation that has forced the world community to seek out newer, less violent ways of putting pressure on rogue actors to bring them back into the civilized community. It reminds me of a quote from Gandhi. One time someone called Gandhi a pacifist, in which he actually got a little upset. And he said that he's insisted that he has never been a pacifist. A pacifist simply allows evil to happen. Gandhi said evil must always be resisted. He simply believed in a nonviolent means of resistance. So in closing, we can define war as a violent conflict. We can define conflict as the opposite of peace. Given that change is an absolute truth, there will always be some level of conflict. The best we can do is to continue to strive for a less violent means of conflict. Thank you for listening. After our closing words, Whittaker will close us out with hymn 163, "For the Earth Forever Turning." And now for our closing words. With unity of spirit, we go our ways, in universal fellowship until we meet again. Thank you.